Hey, what's up guys? Jake with Legacy 4x4 here again, and today we're going to be doing some maintenance on my 1990 Ford Bronco. Specifically, we are going to be overhauling the entire fuel system. So with that said, let's roll the intro and let's get started. Alright, so my 1990 Ford Bronco runs and drives great. I haven't had any significant issues with it. There's a couple small little things that I'm going to have to go through and fix, but overall I've had no significant issues with it. The only problem I've had with it, and it's kind of a strange one, is that it runs out of gas, but not when the gas tank is empty. So it runs out of gas right around the 6-7 gallon mark of fuel left in the tank. Now, as I was thinking about it, I figured the reason for that is there's got to be some kind of a break, a hairline fracture, a pin, something like that in the fuel pump system itself, basically so that when it gets down to that 6-7 gallon mark, it then starts to suck in air, which then gives it a no fuel type error on the engine. Anyways, I dropped the fuel tank. I was going to replace the fuel cell sending unit on it because the gauge and the dash of the Bronco also does not work. So I was going to just replace the fuel cell sending unit. I dropped the gas tank, and then I found out that there was a whole bunch of fuel in it. I thought I just ran it completely out of gas, and that was not the case. So then I figured, okay, I can replace the whole pump, I can replace all of that. I saw some debris inside the fuel tank itself, and I was like, okay, that probably needs to get replaced as well. It doesn't have to get replaced. The fuel tank did work. It just has your usual kind of rust because it's a 33-year-old vehicle. Long story short, I eventually just decided, you know what, whatever, I'm just going to replace all of the components in this system. I'm going to go brand new on everything, and I'm not going to have a problem with the fuel system on this Bronco whatsoever. So today we're going to be replacing all of the fuel system components on a 1990 Ford Bronco, starting at the fuel tank, all of the fuel pump, all the sending units, all of the lines, all of the filters, all the way up to and including the injectors. So the injectors are in the mail. Hopefully those get here today. I've got all the rest of this fuel pump or fuel system stuff sitting on the welding table. So let's go and get started. I'll walk you guys through what parts we have and then the process that we're going to take to do this work on the Bronco. Okay, so we'll start with the biggest item. As you can see, we have a brand new fuel tank for the Bronco. This is an OEM fuel tank. Now, sure, I could have gone to an aftermarket one. It would have been a little bit cheaper to go to an aftermarket type fuel cell, but truthfully, I just didn't want to. The 33-gallon fuel tank that's in this Bronco is plenty big enough for what I want out of this truck. That is a lot of gas to carry around. To get up to a 30-gallon fuel tank and then having to do all of the mounting brackets, all of the custom work, etc., I just figured it wasn't worth it. This truck doesn't need to have a super complex fuel system in it. Now, if you were going to do something like 1 tons, if you're going to stretch out the back, etc., then yeah, then having a different type of fuel system that's a little bit more shallow, that can get sucked up into the frame rails, that makes sense, but that's not the plans for this Bronco. Even if I do go to bigger axles on this Bronco, I'm not going to reposition them. I'm going to put the axles exactly where they are right now. That way I don't have to cut into the body lines of the Bronco because that's not the purpose of this truck. So I figured an OEM fuel system would be absolutely more than adequate for my needs. Starting with that, we got a brand new fuel tank. We have a brand new filler hose. We've got brand new complete fuel lines for the entirety of the truck, and these are nice, aftermarket like nylon plastic type lines. A little bit upgraded there. We've got a new fuel cell sending unit. We've got a new fuel pump. We've got an upgraded wiring harness for it. So my Bronco is a 1990. It does have the 5.8 liter and it does have EFI. However, in 1996, Ford switched over to this type of pigtail pin connector that connects to the fuel tanks, the fuel pump, and the sending unit. So we are going to have to replace the existing connector with this new one. We've got all of your associated hose clamps and bolts and brackets, the straps that hold the tank up. We got some nice new rubber lining for it. And then some Broncos don't have skid plates. So if you don't have a skid plate, the fuel tank is held on with these little straps. And lastly, we have brand new pickups, which these are the most important part. This is where more than likely I think the problem is with why it's not getting all of the fuel out of the bottom of the tank. So we got new pickups for that. And with all that said, let's go and get started. It is kind of sprinkling a little bit outside right now, and I'm hoping the weather breaks here in about an hour, so I'm going to start by assembling the fuel tank itself. So that's going to start by assembling the fuel pump, assembling the sending unit, and assembling this tank, so that then when I'm ready for it, I can just slide the tank up into place. After that, we're going to get onto the truck and get underneath it, and we're going to take out all of those old lines, and we're going to start replacing all of the lines on the truck with the new upgraded lines. Also for reference, I'm not sponsored by them, but in case you are looking for some specialty or replacement OEM parts for your OBS Broncos all the way down to your first generation Broncos, I bought all of the trim panels and a lot of the stuff that I've used so far on the Bronco, as well as all these fuel system parts from Bronco Graveyard. They've got relatively fair pricing, quick shipping, and they have, the most important thing though is they do have those kind of specialty OEM level parts for these trucks. So if you're looking for it, I recommend checking them out. Again, I'm not sponsored by them, but they do have good service, and I've had a pleasant experience with them for the 3 different orders I've made so far. But anyways, with all that said, let's assemble a fuel pump. Okay, so this is what one of the completed assembled units looks like. So down at the bottom, this little white section here, this is the actual fuel pump. So this is where the fuel will come through, this is where the electrics are, this is what pulls the fluid up through the pickup lines up to what is your towards the motor for inlet, and then your return line that comes back down to the tank. As you can see, this is what the whole assembly looks like. On this side here, this is the fuel sending unit. So essentially there's like a little float here. If you're not very familiar with these, there's a little float, effectively a potentiometer that's in here. So as the float raises, you can feel the gear in there move. And that's what tells you, okay, I'm full of fuel, low on fuel. And then obviously as it goes through it, it gives you the different measurements on it. On a Bronco, you got the 3 pins up here where everything connects to, and then coming out the top, this is that pigtail, the new pigtail that we're going to be installing on the truck. So we got this done. I'm going to throw it into the tank, and then I'll show you guys what the tank looks like. It helps if you remember to bring the O-ring over. And then lastly, Ford uses one of these little locking rings here, and that is what holds the fuel pump assembly into the tank. And so to install this, you can use a hammer, you can use a screwdriver, or you can have a fuel ring locking tool, which I did order one when I ordered the rest of these parts. So let's put the fuel ring on. Okay, so now looking at the tank from this side, you can see that's where we put the fuel assembly that I just showed you guys a second ago. It is nice and snug down there, clamped down between the O-ring, that metal plate, and then this locking ring. This is the vent tube for the fuel cell. So fuel tanks have vent tubes, or they can have little vents on them as well. You need to have something that can vent the pressure of the fuel tank. It helps equalize things, and it's also just a fire hazard or an explosive hazard if it were to build up too much pressure, so you gotta have some kind of a vent tube. This usually runs to somewhere on the frame or just dumps out somewhere. Got a new fuel hose, filler hose on this side. One side is hose clamped down, the other hose clamp is just sitting on it until I get it in the truck. And this is kind of loose, so I can still turn it to get this to fit properly. On the front here, we have our pigtail. And then like I said, we have our inlet and our return line, or outlet and return lines right here. So that is the tank as a whole. So next step is going to be, I'm going to put up the bracketry that holds this into place, take a look at the truck, and then start ripping off some of the old fuel lines. So I'm going to actually wire up this pigtail next. It did come with your typical style of, automotive type connector, the one where you like squeeze down on it, you crimp it, and then melt it up there to get a nice little heat shrink on it. Those work perfectly fine, there's nothing wrong with them. I prefer a soldered connection, so I'm going to do a soldered connection on these. Fortunately for me, I do have one of Milwaukee's little wireless solder guns, and I also have a little wireless heat gun as well. So it's not like I have to drag a whole bunch of equipment out there to do a solder, so I'm going to use those, solder this pigtail into place, and then get on to installing the rest of the tank. I'm not going to take the camera underneath the truck to do this because it's kind of annoying to get the camera down underneath at that angle, and all you'd be looking at is like my chin anyways. So let me go get this into place, and then we'll strip out all these old lines and I'll show you guys what the old lines look like. Okay, so I just got the fuel lines off of the truck, and as anybody knows that's done this before, removing old fuel lines is kind of a pain in the butt. You got dirt, you got rust, you got everything else above you, you're crawling underneath it. Stuff's falling on your face, everything's kind of corroded and tight, and it just really isn't fun. Anyways, this is one of the old lines. So you can see up here, this is the part that was actually on the motor, and this is actually pretty clean. But if you fall down the rest of the line, like this is all pretty beat up and dirty. There were a lot of kinks. It just really was, it was old. So I'm very happy that I got some new lines, so I'm very excited about that. I think the truck really did need those, and they're really not that expensive, and if you're doing all this work, you might as well just put the new lines in anyways. Now, Ford does use this kind of special fuel line connector at the engine. If you don't have one of these little tool sets, you can get it for about $8 on Amazon. I've had this one for quite a while. It's one of those things that you buy once and it just sits in a drawer, and then when you need it, you need it. You got to kind of like press these on here to get these fuel fittings off, and it's really not fun to do. You press really hard on it, you just got to kind of wiggle until it comes loose and yank it off. But when in doubt, just apply more force. It will come off, I promise. It's just not the easiest thing in the world. Anyways, we got these lines off. I'm going to go run the new lines on the truck, and then we're going to try to get this fuel tank installed and do a test of it right away, hopefully before it gets dark. Anyways, I'm going to run the rest of these lines. I'll catch up with you guys in a minute. Alright, moment of truth. So, I haven't fully buttoned everything up yet. It is all loosely in place. The brackets that hold things together are loosely tightened down. The fuel tank itself is loosely bolted in. Everything else is just loosely installed. All the fuel connectors are obviously finished. But what I want to do is I want to put gas in it. I want to make sure the truck starts and turns on and see if the fuel gauge works, and make sure I've got the wiring right and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to pour 5 gallons of gas in this thing and see if the Bronco starts. Now, I'm obviously not expecting this to go an immediate instant start because it does have to get fuel through the lines, but let's see if she wants to just turn on. All right. Alright, I think I got some wires crossed. Still not getting fuel. Okay, so after a fair amount of troubleshooting, I did identify what the problem was. And that problem was that those wire colors actually did not match up. So I had to go back through and figure out which wires did what. I did that by hooking up a multimeter to all of the wires, testing for continuity, and that was how I found my 2 ground wires. And then after finding the 2 ground wires, I actually hooked up a 12-volt spare 12-volt battery I had, hooked it up to it, and I had 1 ground wire connected, and then I touched the other 2 potential option wires until I heard the fuel pump kick on. As soon as I heard the fuel pump kick on, I knew I had the right wires all lined up, and then I just identified which ones would be for the fuel sending unit, got those connected, and now the Bronco is working again. Let me turn it on for you guys. You guys can hear that it is running and ready to be driven. Alright, so you can see that it works. I am having a slight idle issue. I haven't gotten to putting the fuel injectors in yet. I'll do that off camera. Hopefully the fuel injectors and then doing a little bit of adjustment up on the fuel reel will hopefully solve my idle issue. But in the meantime, the fuel gauge and the fuel pump and the whole new fuel system, everything is working exactly the way it should. So with that said, I'm going to take you guys back inside the garage. We'll talk about what's next on the Bronco. Okay, so back inside here now. On the Bronco, I got to figure out that idle issue, and I will kind of troubleshoot that when I get a chance. So it works, it runs and drives. You do kind of got to feather the gas a little bit to get it to warm up before it'll sit there and idle. That was a cold start on the Bronco, so sometimes it does that where it just dies on me a little bit. I will finesse around what that issue is, hopefully when I get to installing the injectors. So I've got a box of Motorcraft replacement injectors on here. Those are going to go onto the truck. And then hopefully that will solve both our high idle, some of our fuel issues, our fuel economy issues, and then also help to quiet things down a little bit and keep the truck running nice and smoothly. After that, I'll do that off camera. There won't be a video on replacing injectors alone. After that though, I will then start the next project, which on the Bronco, the next project is going to be the paint. And so that video is going to start. I've got to do a little bit of body work on those rear quarter panels where there's a little bit of rust, so I'll do a little bit of body work, and then we're going to come through, take out the headlights and taillights, take out the grille, and then do a full paint job on the Bronco. Going to try to go back to a dark green color on this, which I think is the original color of this truck. Going to go back to that kind of color, freshen it up a little bit, and then we're going to put on brand new taillights, brand new headlights, a brand new front grille on the Bronco. After paint, then we'll get into building out the back of the Bronco for all of the camp stuff. So we've got a couple more videos on this before the Bronco's inaugural trip somewhere in Western North Carolina. I hope you guys like this video. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. I got some more stuff I'm working on as well. So hopefully you guys will start seeing some more videos on the Commando, on the Bronco. I've got a new tow truck. I got an F350. And I've got a little other project sitting in the corner of the yard that we're going to work on hopefully this summer. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you like this video. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them down below. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll catch you all in the next one.